Good evening, everybody. Hope you are all well, and I'm going to give you the opportunity to ask me some questions at the end, so I'll try and keep to reasonable time frames. Can I just ask, show of hands like Remy did, how many people use objectives and key results within the business at the moment? Okay, interesting. And how many people have visited the town/city of Swindon in Wiltshire? Okay, excellent. Okay, I'm going to share with you some of the experience that Nationwide Building Society has had as it's gone through an agile transformation and is still going through that transformation. Share some of my personal journey with you as well, and talk a lot around culture and the impact that culture can have within an organisation, some of the barriers and the blockers that you face and what you need to do about them. So first up, it would be amiss of me not to talk about Nationwide, the Building Society, and talk about some of its key features. We're a mutual organisation, so we are owned by our members, just about 16 million members now, and each member gets a vote in our annual general meeting, so they get to influence what we do as an organisation. They get to vote for our directors, they get to vote for remuneration packages and things like that, and we hold them very much at the heart of the organisation. We are there to serve our members, so we don't have a shareholder to worry about, we just serve our members. We have been number one in customer service within financial services in our chosen markets for about the last 6 or 7 years, and we actually have an objective and a key result within the organisation, which is that we have to have clear distance between ourselves and the competition. So we're very proud of the fact that currently we've got a lead of 5.8% over our nearest competitors in financial services. We've also been voted Best Bank by Which for the last 3 years, which is kind of ironic because we're a building society. And we've also got the Best Mortgage Award this year from Which as well. We're UK's most trusted financial brand, so people understand the message of mutuality and engage with it. And we often return profits in the region of nearly £750 million each year back to our members. So we enhance their interest rates, their products, give them incentives. And we're also very active in driving social agenda changes. So we actively lobby in Parliament, not for the benefit of our shareholders, but for the benefit of our members and for wider society. Our mission is build society nationwide. And that's not just some clever marketing ruse to turn the words around. That is absolutely the heart of what we do. So we engage in things like building properties. We are running a project at the moment in Swindon to build out property that will be affordable. We work to try and tackle homelessness, and we look to set the right social agenda for landlords so that property that is being rented out, whether it's through our buy-to-let products or not, is fit for people to live in. We've also been around for over 100 years, and so that means that we have some different challenges to the ones that Hannah faces in metal, because we've got a lot of legacy products, a lot of legacy services, and of course, a lot of legacy behaviours. Okay, I mentioned I'd sort of talk to you about Swindon. As we're here at the Agile Roundabout, it would be amiss of me not to talk about this fantastic feature in Swindon, awesome piece of engineering called the Magic Roundabout. I don't know if anybody's ever been around the Magic Roundabout. Yeah, okay. So, you know, what an awesome piece of engineering where you have a roundabout in the middle of 5 roundabouts that goes the opposite direction. It's just a great thing. And, you know, for me, it's a sign that alien intelligence once visited Wiltshire and provided us with Stonehenge and this. Okay. So let's talk about the journey that Nationwide is on. Back in 2017, we realised that because it's a VUCA world out there, it's volatile, it's uncertain, it's complex and ambiguous, we needed to change the way that we did change. So we came up with something called #WeAreChange, which had 5 objectives to deliver. Some primary ones which were around delivery velocity and about the value of change. And that word's really important to this story, the word value. Because what we started to realise, and what used to really kind of worry me, was did we actually understand what value is? Okay, and it's different things to different people, but in the context of a large organisation, employing tens of thousands of people and spending hundreds of millions of pounds on change each year, were we really clear on value? Because we'd just made it front and centre, one of the primary drivers for our journey. So we went down this journey and we decided that things like outcomes and objectives and key results would be really important to that. And so we took a lot of the activity that was in train and we started to turn it into OKRs. But we probably did that, in fact we certainly did that, without allowing people to understand what did that mean, what was different, what were we changing. So we created a lot of confusion. Okay, we took some of these kind of totemic projects which were going to run for 2 or 3 years and suddenly forced an agenda on them which said, now break it down into quarterly things, deliver me value. I'm not quite sure what value is, but I want value every quarter, and that's how I'm going to measure you. So we learned an awful lot of lessons and a lot of awful lessons because we took this approach that said, okay, we're going to transform the organisation. About 2,500 people, 3,000 people who work in change, both working for the society and working for our partner organisations. And after having successfully trialled what we thought the operating model would look like, we went big bang and rolled it out. And it's fair to say that for the pilots had been running pretty well, learning a lot of lessons. When we then started to roll it out to a wider audience, we kind of went with the whitewash approach, right? Everybody got forced into a model. So that was problematic. That was back at the start of 2019 when we'd actually pressed the button to make some changes. And as I said, I've been worrying about value. So you then have to start to give yourself some time to think culture and value. And in life, sometimes problems present them to you, which then you can turn into opportunities and think about them in the right way. The picture in the middle is my brain, okay, believe it or not. And the thing circled in red is a brain hemorrhage. So a year ago, I suffered a brain hemorrhage. And that's quite a life-altering thing for you. For many people, it's not survivable. And for some people, it changes your life forever. For me, it gave me a really good opportunity, which was that I got 6 months to think about stuff. The sort of opportunity you just don't get normally in a working life. You can take sabbaticals, but typically they're to go off and do other fun things. I found myself in a position where my brain would work for short periods of time, but needed to rest in between. And it's actually a really powerful way to learn, taking snippets. So to play back to Remy's piece earlier, you know, that 20 to 25 minutes, that was kind of how long I could concentrate for before I needed to go and sleep for 2 hours. Your brain is an amazing thing, and we don't understand everything about it, that's for sure. But there are some books here which for me were really, really pivotal in understanding value and what it meant to the organisation. Over on the right-hand side, you've got John Doerr's Measure What Matters, which is kind of the classic book about OKRs. I think it's really good, but I don't think it's complete. You've also got books over here, like The Fearless Organisation, so Amy Donaldson talking about creating the right leadership organisation, the right cultural behaviour in your organisation. And we've also got some other things which might look left field when you're talking about agile. So Capital Returns, a book recommended to me which is all about how do you use your money in an organisation? How do you pick the right things to go after? Good Profit by the late Charles Koch, which is all about how do you empower people to run an organisation, because you can't be everywhere all the time. The Outward Mindset, so the Arbinger approach to thinking about how you engage with people in an organisation, and the Blueprint for Better Banking, which is all about how Handelsbanken operates globally. So really useful pieces which helped me to stop, think and spend about 6 months thinking about value. So we'd set off on this journey, which was about moving to a more agile organisation. And actually we did that classic thing of we went too fast and we find ourselves stuck between two cultural states. And that is not a happy place for the human being. We like safety and security, we like to know what we're doing. And whilst it might be a VUCA world out there, it's really important to us that we understand what are our parameters, what sort of frame are we operating in. So over on the left-hand side, you can see those things that we we aspired to: psychological safety, agility, accountable freedom, which is a nationwide term which basically means take ownership for something, do the right thing, don't be irresponsible. But you can see there some of the features that we were trying to introduce into the organisation. Our tribes we call squads. Why do we call them squads? We thought tribe was a bit too tribal. Didn't kind of feel like a community thing, it felt like a competition thing. But we wanted to have squads who had fixed funding. Okay? So when you talk about psychological safety for an organisation, it's good to know that if you're working in a team, you've got the money to get things done. You're not having to go back every month, quarter, half year to ask for project funding. That's quite debilitating sometimes. We wanted squads to define their own outcomes. These are the things that they'll be doing over maybe a year or a couple of years, where they can actually think about what capabilities do we have and how could we work to get to them. Constant coaching, so moving away from that kind of classic management of resources and into coaching of resources, and using useful metrics, i.e. not weaponising metrics to turn around and beat people up with. But as you can see, we've got some tensions which still sit within the organisation around trying to pull us back to that comfortable place that we were a few years ago, or what felt like comfort, around using command and control, using waterfall approaches, only funding projects as and when we saw fit, and with hurdle rates and all sorts of provisos included. So, how do you get from there to somewhere better? So I kind of liken changing culture sometimes to this kind of game of Pac-Man, where you're constantly going around coaching, supporting, dealing with issues, helping people to feel more comfortable. And there are some real barriers to psychological safety. Fear of failure. You can't work agile unless you get comfortable failing. Now, we work in a very heavily regulated environment, so people feel that accountability. We have people who are senior managers who operate within the senior manager regime. We have people who are material risk takers. So getting them comfortable with taking risk is quite hard, because the consequences for them are very real. It could be censure, it could even be imprisonment. So we need to think about how do you get people to start building trust, which is underneath there, the trust equation. How do you get people to be comfortable working in a change environment and not being scared of change? Which has always kind of been the irony for me in the decades I've worked in change, is that the people who fear change the most are the change people. Why is that? Well, because we're human beings and we do fear change. You have people who need to be seen as. So we all come to work sometimes and think that there's a persona or a model of what you should look like as a human being, operating within an environment, operating within an organisation. And sometimes our behaviours take us to a different place, which isn't natural for us, but it's because that's how we think we need to project our image. And of course, fear of loss and fear of control, where people are worried that, what am I losing here? What am I losing from my personal agenda, from my personal status, or whatever else it might be? And all of that is underpinned by this, the trust equation, which I'm sure many of you will have seen already, but where it starts to talk about how do you start to create the conditions where you can build trust in an organisation so that you can go on this journey of agility. Because it's really hard. You've got to trust people to be doing the right things. But the trust equation is great because it talks about credibility and reliability. So when you start to deliver through your agile teams, are you delivering what you promised you would? Okay? Have you got credibility because your story that you're telling sounds like a reasonable one? Have you got reliability because you're delivering the things that you said you would when you said you were going to deliver them? Have you got intimacy? Are you sharing your failures with the organisation and using that as a learning opportunity? And then underpinning that all, are you actually doing this on behalf of the organisation, or are you doing this on behalf of yourself, the self-orientation piece? And we're doing this all the time and we don't realise it, building trust with people, creating that ability for people to give trust and receive trustworthiness back. Within Nationwide, we do a lot of things working with external organisations. The logo there is not a Nationwide logo. That is the logo for the Defence College at Shrivenham, who train the British Armed Forces and armed forces from overseas around how to fight good wars. Kind of no way of dodging that, is there really? But we sat down with them because we recruit a lot of people from the armed forces into our organisation. Being in Wiltshire, we've got lots of army bases around us and Air Force bases, no ports, but we pull people in from the Air Force, from the Army, and occasionally from the Navy. And they've got this great thing which they call measure of performance and measure of effect. Now that's important because sometimes within a change world, we get really focused on all of the doing activity. And we actually forget why we're doing it, okay? Now, that might not sound true, but trust me, when I've gone through and tested this across a number of organisations, you get fixated on the task. We get fixated on solving problems because we change people, right? That's what gets us out of bed, doing the difficult stuff, finding the way through. But what, of course, can happen, and I've just used an example here, kind of a classic, move all your customer records from one system to another. And down the left-hand side, you've got all your measures of performance, all your doing tasks. We get sucked into it, don't we? You get sucked into the detail of the work, and you get distracted and lose connectivity with the measure of effect that you're trying to have. And I realised that that was at the heart of value, is that we can all be busy. There's lots of busyness in the world, and you can get connected and overwhelmed with how busy you are, because there's deadlines, there's expectations, there's reporting. Actually, what matters is understanding the measure of effect that you're trying to achieve and taking the time to cascade that and share that with your team. Because if they understand their purpose, they understand the effect you're trying to have them achieve, you've got a much better chance of achieving really good things with Agile, and that then starts to earn you the trust that you need to do more Agile. Now, you can take a view on this in terms of how do you kind of move an organisation into a place where you're only focused on value and what is value. All the work that I did and all the testing that I've done leads me to believe, and with reasonable belief, that there are only 4 things that give you value when you're trying to achieve change and you're running a business. Can you grow revenue? Can you reduce your costs? And that's real costs, not just cutting budgets. Can you grow member satisfaction? And can you reduce risk in your organisation? And we've been going through an exercise of testing that and taking all of the things which our colleagues are working on and trying to run them through this lens to get back to what is the core essence and the real value that you need to achieve. Now, sometimes we find that objectives sit in conflict with one another. Maybe because we've got multiple sponsors trying to work on the same piece of work. Maybe because the team that's trying to deliver something didn't understand what outcome they were trying to achieve and what value we wanted them to drive. By getting back to this and getting people focused, it's amazing what it unlocks for you, because people suddenly understand how to make day-to-day trade-off decisions. What is the true purpose I'm going after, irrespective of what the product might be? Am I trying to grow revenue? Am I trying to reduce risk? Am I trying to drive member satisfaction? And those help people to anchor into where should I go? What decisions do I need to take on a day-to-day basis? By doing that, it allows people to bring their best selves to work because they understand what they're trying to achieve. It also gives us this common language so that we can collaborate effectively across all of the organisation. You know, we're still a complex business, and we kind of dream of the stuff that Hannah showed you for Metal in terms of the simplicity of building your organisation from scratch. It's not possible to do that when you've got an organisation that's been established for over 100 years. We do need to raise the level of capability in the organisation. So more coaching, more support, more training. And one of the mistakes that we made was we kind of left people to get on with stuff thinking that they wanted space. Actually, we'd misread it. What people were was afraid to ask for help. So you've got to figure out how do you provide that help in a way that is genuine to provide a coaching support, as opposed to it feels like you're calling somebody out because they haven't got capability. And that's really hard, because depending on the nature of the organisation that you have and your culture, people might struggle with that. One thing that we're facing into, and it talks about our legacy, is that the assets that we build, typically we used to amortise and expense over a 5-year period. You know, that was a very common thing to do, and accounting practice supports that. You can't necessarily do that all the time now, because the rate of technology development is so fast that things that you build are probably going to be redundant in 2 or 3 years' time, because the world is moving on. It's a VUCA world out there. The pace of change is so great. You've got to move to a point where you can actually deliver product and get value from it and extract that value every quarter, even sooner if you can, because you need to start getting into your payback cycle so much sooner. We can't do 2-year projects and then hope there's a pot of gold at the end, because the world will have changed and moved on. So we're looking to get more having of value rather than this kind of slavish obsession with doing. Now, that doesn't mean that planning and delivery are not important anymore. They are still at the heart of how you deliver, but it's about how you focus your teams. I'm not going to drain that down, but this is some of the feedback that we've had in terms of engaging with people around giving them a better understanding of what value is. So, you know, we've got people now, we're calling them to action. It's thought-provoking for them. They're getting value from it. They're understanding what was previously potentially a complex problem. But let's be clear, we've moved on the learning scale into the consciously unable part. We now understand perhaps what some of the gap is, and we're going to need to keep moving to reinforce, to educate, to coach. Okay, I'll leave you with one final thought from some great residents in Wiltshire. If you're not familiar with BBC Three and This Country, you've got some time to spend and some back series to watch. But as either Kerry or Curtin would say, never ever turn your back on an outcome or an OKR, because they're bloody vicious things, and they'll come back and bite you if you don't keep an eye on them. Okay.